at least we are trying to make it look cool.
And it is a...
It's a community of readers. They're like, how many are we girls? 8,000 people. And this is going to be on our podcast, which is on YouTube. And I'm going to send you the link.
Wonderful.
Maybe you would subscribe to it, so we'll have a new subscriber.
I will consider that.
Well, it's your first time in Romania, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's all very fresh. I arrived yesterday evening. So
Oh, okay.
practically you're my first Romanian experience.
Oh my God. I'm so
Which
overwhelmed. And it was
which
nice.
is a great first impression, I must say.
Okay, thank you so much. I will do my best to keep it that way because I am really nervous meeting you.
You are?
Yeah,
but
I am.
I'm also nervous.
Well, you don't have to. You're the writer.
I think they're still bringing coffee now.
They're going to bring the coffee.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
but we need to.
We need to begin because we are
need to
behind.
begin because we need to stay on time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay on time with this book. Although it was a one-day reading for me because
Oh, really?
it was I don't know, magic. I couldn't.
Wonderful, thank
leave
you.
it.
Very happy to hear that.
Thank you so much for this. Before all the serious questions, do you travel a lot?
Well, not really actually. No, I used to travel much more than I do now, and now I travel for work, like now to Romania. And actually I prefer that. It's much more interesting to travel when you have something to do, because it's at the same time an occasion to meet people of the place. And when you travel like I used to do as a tourist, it remains all a bit superficial. No?
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I am quite a traveler myself.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I do have a project that I used to travel every month in a different country to follow the footsteps of one of my favorite authors, and then come back and tell people about it, brag about it if you want to.
And who is this favorite author?
Many of them. I was in Paris following Hemingway. I was in Dublin following James Joyce. I was in, Dresden following Kurt Vonnegut, and so on and so forth.
So that's a wonderful project.
Yes, it is indeed. Yeah, and I think traveling is such a great way to educate people and children. And then this happened.
Yes.
And I find myself at the wrong side of traveling.
Well, it's actually, I live in Italy now. I'm Dutch. I was born in the Netherlands, and then it's now 15 years ago I moved to Italy. And living in Italy changed my perspective. And I saw in Italy what tourism, what traveling can do to a country. And it's not all 100% positive. There is a downside to it.
Of course.
And tourism is really also damaging. So being on the receiving end in Italy changed my perspective and made me think about the whole thing.
Is this why you don't travel that much anymore?
Well, it's part of it, but it's also because I grew up and I'm a bit more lazy.
Okay. More mature, I guess.
Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Good. Well, it's actually it's not a travel book. It's not a book about tourism, although it seems it is. It's actually a book about tourism against tourism. How come?
Well, I would say it's more a book about Europe nowadays.
It's mostly a book about Europe, yeah.
And actually the idea for it was, it had a lot to do with me moving to Italy. Of course, when I moved to Italy, it had a couple of effects on me. Gradually, I noticed that I became a little bit less Dutch, which is only very healthy for a person. I noticed that I became a little bit more Italian, and which is also a very happy consequence. But most of all, I noticed that I became more European. Because all of a sudden I had two countries that I called home. And when you have two countries, you can also have many countries now. So I felt more European. It was for quite some time that I was asking myself, what does that mean? What does it mean to feel European? What could a European identity be? And when you start to think about that, perhaps you don't even have to think for that long before you realize that it has a lot to do with our relationship to the past. Because in Europe, we are surrounded by the past. There are remains, tangible remains of the past everywhere around us, especially in Italy, of course. In Italy, I live opposite to the medieval cathedral from the 11th century, and it's not even very exceptional to have these remains of the past around you. And when you live your life surrounded by remains of the past, of course, it's part of our pride. We feel very good about it, at least I do. But perhaps there's also a downside to it, because when you live your entire life surrounded by glorious remains from previous centuries, sooner or later it's tempting to conclude that the best is behind us, that the better times are in the past. And also this nostalgia, this longing for a better time in the past, is paradoxically a constant in European culture. We always had that. It's always, even the ancient Greeks who still had to build our civilization had the idea that the golden age was in the past. And when you think about it, in the case of Europe, there are also perhaps some objective arguments to arrive at the same conclusion, that the past was a better time for Europe. For instance, geopolitically, that's obvious. No, the times that the nations of Europe ruled the world is definitely behind us, and it's all for the better, don't get me wrong, but it means that Europe arrived at a time in history where it has to redefine itself, redefine its position between the superpowers of the world. And also perhaps economically. Here in Romania, perhaps it's all a different story, but what I see very much in Italy and in Western Europe is that the old economical model based on industry makes less and less sense. In Genoa, where I live, there used to be a huge industry of shipbuilding and that kind of thing. Nowadays, it doesn't make sense because the competition of the countries of the East is much too strong. So also economically, Europe arrived at a point where it has to redefine itself. And it's something that is very visible in the south, around the Mediterranean, but it's also in the north. And what you see, and that is also something that is very visible in the south around the Mediterranean, is that as an alternative means of making an economy, they sell this main characteristic, which is their past. The past is something you can sell. You can sell tickets for your museums and for your monuments, and this is what brings tourism.
It's a new market, actually.
Yes. So it is tempting to see tourism as a solution to this economical problem. But then it brings new problems with it. And this is very much part of the modern European identity, this tourism, especially in a country like Italy, but also in Greece, Spain, and that kind of countries, but also in cities like Amsterdam or Prague. And Europe is really becoming Grand Hotel Europa. No?
Indeed. Well, it's a completely new perspective for us Romanian. You just mentioned that, because even if geographically we are in Europe, as a part of it. We are only in Europe, I don't know, since 2007.
Yes, I realized that.
And I didn't actually saw things like this before reading your book. It was completely new to me. I was so I don't know, hungry to discover new places, to discover new people, to cross boundaries. It's actually a book about boundaries and maybe the lack of them. And I was with your protagonist when she proposed, I don't know, like a ticket of 400 euros to see a museum or something.
Ah, yes.
How can we preserve this?
Well, it is already very good that you ask that question. It's not normal to ask this question. The question, how can we limit the damages caused by tourism? Okay, then there are many answers, but I'm already very happy when you start to see the problem. When you are aware of the fact that it is not only a means of earning money, but it is also damaging for the people living in a country. Because there is material damage. An example is the Sistine Chapel. No, in the Vatican there is this chapel decorated by Michelangelo, and it was never built for
being visited.
What is it? 20 million visitors a year. It was built for the conferences they held to choose a new pope once every 30 years, and not 20 million visitors. So it's not surprising that it doesn't. It cannot cope with that, with this popularity, and it's just the breadth of people visiting it that damages
and the skin and the dust and everything affecting it.
So that is a really material damage, and it's a big problem. So what do we do? Because it's also very nice to be democratic now, to have it open for everybody who wants to see it. But it's not sustainable. If we keep it like that, in 20 years, the frescoes are gone. So we have to protect it in some way. But then there is also, apart from this material damage, there's damage to the social infrastructure of the city. You see that very much in cities like Amsterdam or Prague, but also in Genoa, where I live. It is, or Venice is, of course, the most dramatic example. Most of the story is set in Venice, and that is, of course, not a coincidence, because Venice is perhaps the most dramatic example of a city that hopelessly surrendered itself to mass tourism. And the effect is that it is hardly a city anymore, because nobody is living there anymore. Yeah. In the 14th century, there were like 200,000 persons living in Venice. Now it's less than 50,000, and it's getting less and less. So it's turning into an open-air museum. Now you also have to pay entrance fee to go to Venice, as if it were a museum. So,
but anyways, it doesn't help, because we're altering the culture and we're altering the civilization there.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a city anymore, and it's also from the perspective of Italians. Let's take Italy as an example. Of course, Venice is a very special case because it is an island, but it makes it all the more visible that the Italians that used to live there are banned from the city center. Also because the houses are getting too expensive there. Investors buy the houses to make hotels and B&Bs and that kind of thing. So then gradually your population is relegated to a serving class living in the suburbs. And okay, this can be a choice. You can choose, this is the future of our country. Okay, but let's talk about it. Perhaps it's not our choice.
Yeah.
But if we don't want this, we have to do something about it.
Indeed. I read your book this weekend, I have to admit, and at the beginning I was taking my phone and making notes, and then I got frustrated and I said, no, I cannot interrupt myself and just write things down. So I had these little marks here and I couldn't stop. It's so much more than a novel. It's a I don't know, a gesture of consciousness, of raising consciousness. How can you do that with a novel? I mean, it's not fiction, or it's less fiction than you would expect.
Well, it's talking very much about real problems in the present, so that is not fictional. It's what we've been talking about so far is not fiction. But then, of course, my task is to find a form for it that makes you turn the pages. So then I make a story out of it, and a story that the nice thing about the novel as a form is that it enables you to show certain themes from many different perspectives, as opposed to when you write an essay. Now, I can also write an essay about tourism, but when you write an essay, it's like from the beginning to the end, one argument with a conclusion. The nice thing about a novel is that you can show the ambiguity, because you have different points of view from different characters and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to show the dilemmas from all different sides.
And you're also mixing genres.
Yes, of course, I mix everything. Yeah.
How can you do that? I mean, it's quite an art.
Well, thank you. I take it as a compliment, but it was necessary. And if it's necessary, I do it. And then, of course, we have to say that it is also a heartbreaking love story.
It is indeed.
We must emphasize that, because that's always good for the selling.
Yeah, I heard that you wrote that in 9 months.
Yes, that's true.
How can this be possible with so many layers and so many informations and so many perspectives?
Yes, but perhaps the better answer would be that I wrote it in 9 months plus 25 years of experience, plus also many, many months of preparation, of thinking about it, talking about it with Stella, my girlfriend. She's very much, as the book is dedicated to her, but that's not because I wanted to be nice to her. It's because
although she deserves it.
She deserves it very much, because it's it comes out of things we have been talking about for a long time. So that was also my preparation. Without that, of course, I could never have written it in 9 months.
Well, it's impressive. And it's also impressive the fact that it's written by hand?
Yes, yeah, I wrote it by hand.
That's
the way I changed a bit now, but that's the way I used to work in those days. Yeah.
Okay.
Also because I like to sit outside working. It is also very good for that. So
it's inspiring.
Sitting outside in the sun on a terrace, and then, of course, I didn't take my computer with me, so I wrote with pen and paper.
That's also impressive, because, I don't know, modern writers don't do it anymore.
No, but I can recommend it. It's better, actually.
Why do you find this better?
It's better because also when you write on a computer, it's too easy to change things. So it is too easy to formulate in a way that you're not very happy about, but then you can change it anyway. So you can also, when you don't know the beginning of a sentence, you can start a little bit ahead, and then you will see later, that kind of thing. When you work like that with pen and paper, it becomes a mess. You cannot do that. So writing with a pen forces you to think about the entire sentence before you start it. You have to have the entire sentence in your head before you start with the capital.
I never thought of it.
Yeah.
I never thought of it.
So that, and it slows you down. Writing with a pen is also slower, and it is also, but that is perhaps some nonsensical thing that I only think. I have the idea that when you write with your hand, it comes out of your body.
Oh, really?
And it has more breath because
it's
of that.
more you in that.
Well, it helps the rhythm.
It's more introspective?
I don't know if it's that, but it helps the rhythm of the sentences because it follows the breath.
Does this anything to do with the fact that you're a classicist or in fond of classicism?
I am a classicist, but I don't think this has much to do with it. Many things have a lot to do with the fact that I'm a classicist. But this perhaps, or perhaps I have to think about it. I don't know.
But what do you think about technology and the way that it affects us nowadays?
Well, that's a very broad question.
It is indeed. Yeah. Let's limit it that right
now. No, but I'm of course extremely old-fashioned and proud of it.
You should. Yeah.
But I love technology. I'm not against technology.
Okay.
I use computers. I do experiments with artificial intelligence and all that kind of thing. No, I love it.
I took some notes, and at some point you say, I tried to translate it into English, but it was in Romanian, of course. A migrant civilization doesn't conquer the old one, but gives birth to a brand new one. This is a really, really deep conclusion for me, because it's not only about civilizations and about society, it's about the way we live now. How do you see this kind of mixture, if you want, for the future? How is this altering us as?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I had, at a certain point, I realized that I had to talk also about migration. Because it would be very strange to talk about one group of travelers, the tourists, without talking about the other group of travelers, the immigrants. Both of them are very much part of the European reality of today. And I noticed the very cynical contrast between the two groups when I was visiting Malta. This also became a chapter in the book, but I was really there. And the thing we know about Malta is that it is, so to speak, the other Lampedusa. No? It is more or less on the same height in the Mediterranean, and like Lampedusa, it is the goal of many of these embarkations leaving the African coasts of people desperately trying to reach Europe. And I was there in Malta, like, was it a week, 10 days? And the strange thing was that in this entire period, I never saw one black person. And that's very strange. And then when you start to investigate, you discover quite easily that it is very much part of deliberate policy of the Maltese government. It's not that these people don't arrive, they do arrive, even if the government tries to push them away to Italy. But when they arrive, they are kept out of sight because they are afraid that they will damage tourism. And that is, of course, very cynical.
It is.
So in order not to disturb rich, white travelers who are looking for the past, you keep out of sight the poor black travelers who are looking for the future. And so I had to talk about it. And I think that it's very healthy and important to realize that migration is by no means a new phenomenon. The history of humanity has been shaped by migration. It's always been like that. And the dynamic is that migration changes the culture. And it's useless to oppose to that. And it is also, most of the times, a very good thing. And gradually, out of the original culture and the culture of migrants, something new arises, a mixture that is actually better than what you had before. There are many examples of that. For example, if my own country, the Netherlands, in the 16th century, when Amsterdam was built, when the Netherlands became very rich economically, but also culturally, that was for a greater part thanks to migrants who contributed enormously to the wealth, but also to the spiritual ideas of the Netherlands in that period. So there are many examples of that.
Actually, I've been 3 times to Malta, I guess, or 4, and I never noticed that there's no black person there. And then I read your book, and it was like, yeah, indeed, it is like that. And I felt guilty for taking things for granted. And I think this is quite of a wake-up call, if you like, because it puts things in a completely different perspective. What are you working on right now?
Well, actually, I just finished a new book that a year ago came out in the Netherlands, which is something completely different. It's something I've never done before, a historical novel.
Okay.
And it's a very historical novel because it's set in ancient Greece.
Oh, okay.
So finally I can make money out of my classicist education.
Studies, yeah.
And it's a novel about Alcibiades, who is a person who really lived at the end of the 5th century BC in Athens. And it's a very remarkable person who lived a wonderful life.
It's one of the greatest heroes.
Yeah, well,
ancient Greek.
Hero or villain, he is very ambiguous in many ways. So it's actually it's a feast to tell his life. But that was not the main reason why I decided to write this book. The main reason is that I realized that he was a protagonist in a period in history when Athenian democracy went into decline. And he was very much involved in that, and he was actually perhaps also to a certain degree guilty of those developments. And when you look about the symptoms that in that time announced the decline of democracy, for us nowadays they are scaringly recognizable.
Indeed.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. So that's the main reason why I wrote this historical novel about Alcibiades.
You always have a hidden agenda.
Yes, I must have. Yes.
It's so much more than novel. It's so much more than novel, so much more than literature.
Yeah, well, that's where the urgency comes from. Now, I can tell a wonderful story, but why do I want to tell this wonderful story now instead of another? That's because I think that it speaks about things that are important now for us.
And that we are taking for granted, as I said. What's your relationship with your readers, given that we are addressing to a community of readers?
I love them.
Okay. Do you take feedback from them, or?
Yes. Well, I like meeting my readers. I just did a huge tour through the Netherlands and Belgium for this new book, Alcibiades. Met many readers, and that's one of the most grateful aspects of my strange profession. I like it very much. It's also a very healthy counterbalance, because most of the time when I'm actually writing, it's a very solitary activity.
Indeed.
It's also very difficult to talk about it because nobody knows what you're doing. And then when it's finished, to go into the real world and meet readers is for me a very healthy counterbalance of that.
This is your first book in translated in Romania, and it was really, really well received.
Well, actually, it's the second. La Superba has been.
Was it in Romania? Because I didn't find it.
Yes, it is a different publishing house.
That's my bad. Well, this one made waves. Do you think that this kind of book is differently received in different countries, in different cultures?
Yes, it is. This one has been translated now in, I think, 25 languages, and I've been to many of those countries. And it's very interesting to notice that there are differences, yes.
Was there something unexpected for you to receive from your readers as a feedback, as a response to your book?
Yeah, so many unexpected things, but it's difficult now to think of one particular example. But it's also very, very strange to see how it's received in different countries. For instance, I was very much surprised that it became a huge success in Norway.
Oh, okay.
And I'm, of course, very happy about that. But I cannot understand why, because it doesn't seem that Norway has this kind of problems or yeah. So it is in a way that you cannot predict. It can touch something in the readers, and that's all very interesting to see.
Indeed. I don't know how much time do we have, because we are a bit behind schedule. I have a lot of things here. I just put on paper your traveler's typology. That was really, really interesting to see. Horror family, the astronomers, the blonde robber princess. You have a really keen sense of observation. You're a great observer. How can you be so in touch with reality and then translate it into story?
But that I don't find so difficult. You just
Really?
have to look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look and listen.
Yeah, look and listen, and then I write it. Yeah. Perhaps it helps not to be distracted all the time by your telephone.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. Perhaps looking and listening nowadays is a bit more difficult because there's so many distractions. But as soon as you put away these distractions, it becomes very easy.
Indeed. And also, although it's a really serious book and a really serious theme, you have a really, really nice sense of humor. How can you manage to put this into your stories, into such a serious story?
Yeah, I think it's important to put also some humor in it. I think I would never write a funny book, a slapstick book, a book that is written only to laugh. That doesn't interest me so much, but what interests me is the mixture of the emotions. So actually, when you're talking about something serious, then as a counterpoint, have also some humor that can be very effective. So I'm actually looking for this mix.
Does your characters help?
The characters help, yeah.
How do you find them? How do you build them?
Well, the characters actually it's a misunderstanding to think that I have my own characters under control. It's not like that. Actually, when I start to create a character, very soon this character begins to have a will of its own. And I cannot control him anymore. It was very funny with this book, with Mr. Montebello, the Maggiordomo of the Grand Hotel Europa. Initially, I had a much smaller role for him in mind. And when I was writing the chapter when I had to introduce him, when he first came up, I remember that I was in Florence, and I was writing there outside on a terrace with pen and paper. And then when I wrote the introduction of this character, I realized that I needed a name for him. So I was thinking of the name, and then at the opposite side of the street, there was a small shop that was called Montebello.
Oh.
And then I thought, that's the perfect name for him. And then I called him Montebello. And from that moment on, when he had this very extravagant name, he began to come on the foreground. I wanted him to have a very small role, but he didn't agree with me. Because of his very extravagant name, he actually then became a very important character.
You didn't gave him a name, you gave him a voice, actually.
Yeah, actually, it is like that.
And a really important part in the narrative. What about the other characters? I mean, I think I saw somewhere that you had some sort of a problem with one of them. Some book release was banned because of one of your
that
characters
was a very ugly story.
herself
Yes,
in the book.
Yeah, there was that happened in Venice actually, and there was this one character. She's called Paolo Marini, and she was the director of the academy, the museum. She recognized herself in one of the characters of the book.
It's not hard. She had the same name.
Exactly. She was called Paolo Marini. Yeah. And she thought that it was insulting, but it wasn't at all. And it was also the truth. And anyway, so that was, and it was also something that wasn't handled very well by my Italian publisher. And it became a much bigger story than it should have.
But I don't know, it's best for selling.
No, well, yeah, you can use it. Yeah, but the character, the Italian publisher didn't want to do that. Well, no, but that has been resolved.
Great.
But it was, yeah.
But then again, that raises another topic that we cannot stop talk about. The boundary between fiction and reality. How can you manage this?
Well, almost everything I've written in my life in some way or another has to do with this theme, the relationship between fantasy and reality, fact and fiction. It's something that fascinates me very much. And it's not because that enables me to do all kinds of literary tricks. Well, also that is very funny. But it is because I think it's very much a theme of today. Mm-hmm. We live in times where it is more and more difficult to tell them exactly apart, to tell the difference between fact and fiction. There is a huge gray zone between the two. And I see myself always talking about that and looking for that gray zone. And so I like to mix fact and fantasy. I like, for instance, in Grand Hotel Europa, it is a fictional story, but I want it to be set in a very real setting. So you can, all these stories about Malta, and Skopje, and other places, Venice, other places where the characters go. I want it to be extremely realistic. Mm-hmm. And you can Google it, and it is.
It's really Googleable.
Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah. And I like readers to be confused.
Well, when
you start Googling it, you think, oh well, this is actually a real story, mm-hmm. because every detail is right. But then it isn't, because it is invented. Well, it all begins with the fact that there is this protagonist, the person who is telling this story, who has this very strange, improbable name, Ilja Leonard Pfeijffer. So it seems an autobiographical story, but of course it isn't.
You are a character yourself, a fascinating character, and it's really not. It's really appropriate for you to be a character in your own book. It is a fascinating experience to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank
I will
you.
use the opportunity to ask you for an autograph.
Of course. So your name is
My
Liv.
name is Liv. Yeah. My name is Liv.